Why your confidence scares married men more than rejection, Carl Jung. Have you ever noticed how some married men are visibly uncomfortable around confident women? We are not talking about flirting or seduction. We're talking about something much deeper and more disturbing. Your safe presence, the way you occupy your space without asking permission, the way your words carry certainty. Why does it bother them so much? Why does outright rejection seem easier to deal with than simply standing in front of someone who knows their own worth? The answer is hidden in the darkest layers of the male psyche that Carl Jung dedicated his life to unraveling. There is a specific psychological mechanism that makes his confidence work like a relentless mirror, reflecting exactly what he spends his whole life trying to hide from himself. And when that mirror appears, the married man doesn't run away from you. It runs away from the devastating reflex you provoke without even trying. Get ready to understand the psychological truth that no one dares to reveal about this phenomenon. 1. The psychological mirror that your confidence creates. When a confident woman comes into the field of vision of a married man, something invisible happens. It's not physical attraction. It is not romantic interest. It is an automatic psychological process that works like a mirror being held up in front of him, reflecting aspects of himself that he never wanted to face. Your firm posture, your direct gaze, the way you speak without hesitation, show him everything that he is not. And this comparison does not happen consciously. It is an instantaneous, visceral reaction that emerges from the depths of the psyche. This reflection reveals the choices he has made throughout his life. The times he agreed when he wanted to disagree, the dreams he abandoned to keep the peace, the versions of himself that he buried to fit into the role of husband, provider, responsible man. You don't have to say a word. His simple, secure existence exposes how small he has become within his own life. And that hurts in a way that no rejection can hurt. Rejection attacks the ego, but it keeps the internal structure intact. When someone rejects him, he can blame circumstances, timing, incompatibility. It can preserve the narrative that everything is fine with who he is. But the mirror that your confidence holds up does not offer this protection. It shows that the problem is not in the external world. The problem lies in the gigantic distance between who he has become and who he could have been. This mechanism explains why married men often feel threatened by women who are simply living authentically. There is no seduction involved. There is no intention to provoke. But the presence of someone who fully inhabits his own life works as a constant reminder of everything he negotiated to get where he is. And the stronger your confidence, the clearer this reflection becomes. It is impossible to ignore the discomfort that arises when he realizes that he is trapped in a life that he may never have really chosen with full awareness. 2. The narcissistic wound that he carries in secret. Every man carries within him an idealized image of who he should be, an invincible warrior, a fearless conqueror, someone who never doubts, never wavers, never shows weakness. This image has been built over decades, fueled by family expectations, societal pressures, and the need to prove constant value. But there is a distance between this idealized image and everyday reality. And it is in this distance that the wound lives. The narcissistic wound has nothing to do with superficial vanity. It is a deep rupture between the perception he needs to maintain about himself and what he really experiences every day. Within marriage, this wound remains hidden because the dynamics of the relationship often sustain mutual illusions. There are defined roles, predictable routines, a structure that allows him to avoid looking directly at his deepest insecurities. When you show up with your genuine confidence, that wound is touched directly. You're not trying to hurt him, but his entire presence communicates something he can't ignore. You don't need him to validate your existence. You're not seeking outside approval. You're not trading your authenticity to be accepted. This emotional independence strikes at the core of the wound because it exposes a brutal truth. He built his entire identity on top of being needed, of being the provider, of being the gravitational center of one's life. Seeing that you can fully exist without any of these things destabilizes the entire structure that he has spent years building. The wound opens because it is evident that his strength may have always been a performance, a heavy mask that he has worn for so long that he forgot that there is a face underneath. And when that mask starts to slip, the panic that arises is not anger at you, it is terror of oneself. If you want to understand why your confidence scares married men more than rejection, and how this fear exposes the shadow they lose control over, the Jung method is fixed in the first comment. 3. Why rejection is safer than internal confrontation. Rejection has a curious quality. It is external. When someone rejects a married man, whether it is a look of disinterest or a polite refusal, the blow comes from outside. He may process this as an isolated event, something that happened due to factors beyond his control. It can even turn into a story that preserves your self-image. She was not available. The timing was wrong. There was no connection. The narrative remains manageable. But the internal confrontation that his confidence provokes does not offer this way out. There is no way to outsource responsibility. There is no way to blame external circumstances. The discomfort comes from within, from that place where he keeps all the truths he never wanted to admit, about the choices he made out of fear, about the pieces of himself that he sacrificed in exchange for safety, about the life he built more out of obligation than out of genuine desire. This type of confrontation requires courage that he may not have developed. It requires looking into the inner mirror and recognizing that there is a version of yourself that was abandoned long ago. A version that had dreams of its own, authentic desires, a voice that didn't need to ask permission to exist. Facing this is devastating because it means admitting that he is not a victim of circumstances. He is an active accomplice of his own prison. That is why rejection is infinitely more palatable. It confirms that the problem is in the world, not in it. It allows him to return home, to the familiar family structure, to the comfortable roles that do not require him to grow up. Rejection closes the door and allows him to continue sleeping, but his confidence keeps the door open, illuminating the very thing he spends his whole life trying to keep in the dark. And between facing this or simply walking away from you, his choice will always be to run away. 4. Marriage as an emotional hiding place. There is a huge difference between a consciously chosen marriage and a marriage used as a refuge. In the second case, the structure of the relationship works as a place where the man can hide from himself. Family responsibilities become the perfect shield against any internal questioning. He's too busy providing, caring, keeping everything running to stop and ask if he's really living or just surviving. Inside this hiding place, he doesn't have to confront his lack of genuine purpose. You don't have to admit that you may not know who you are when you are not fulfilling some social role. He does not have to face the emptiness that arises when he imagines what he would do if all obligations disappeared tomorrow. Marriage, in this context, becomes a ready-made identity. He is the husband, the father, the provider, and while you're busy being these things, you can avoid the scariest question: who am I without any of these labels? Your confidence threatens this hiding place because you represent the opposite of that. You're not using relationships to run away from yourself. He is not defining himself only by the roles he plays. Your identity comes from within, not from the external structures you inhabit. And when he realizes this, even if unconsciously, his hideout begins to look like exactly what it is: a self-imposed prison disguised as responsibility. This explains why married men often become defensive or even hostile towards confident women. It's not about you. It's about what you stand for. You are living evidence that it is possible to exist with integrity, that it is possible to build a life from conscious choices rather than accumulated obligations. And if that's possible, then he has no more excuses. The hiding place becomes transparent, and having to leave there would require a courage that he has not yet found. 5. The shadow that his presence illuminates. The shadow is not someone's bad side. It is simply everything that the person does not want to recognize about themselves. Every married man carries in his shadow the desires he has repressed, the ambitions he has abandoned, the anger he has never expressed, the resentment he has never admitted. These elements don't disappear just because he decided to ignore them. They stay there, fermenting in the unconscious, influencing behaviors that he does not even notice. When you show up to be completely yourself, without apologizing, without dimming your light, something happens. Your presence directly illuminates his shadow. Not because you're trying to expose anything, but because authenticity works like a flashlight that reveals contrasts. The more genuine you are, the more obvious his lack of authenticity becomes. The more whole you present yourself, the more fragmented it feels. This process of shadow lighting is deeply uncomfortable. Suddenly, he starts feeling things he hasn't felt in years. Restlessness, willingness to change, anger at being imprisoned, envy of those who live with freedom. And these emotions have no clear name for him. There is no mental structure to process them. So what does he do? It projects all of this onto you. You become the problem. Your confidence turns into arrogance. Its authenticity becomes a provocation. Its mere existence becomes a threat. The truth is, you're doing nothing but fully existing. But for someone who spends their life denying whole parts of themselves, seeing someone integrated is unbearable. It's a constant reminder of everything he buried alive, and the brighter his light, the darker his shadow looks. It's not your fault. There's nothing you need to change. But understanding this dynamic helps you realize that his reaction was never about who you are. It's about who he didn't have the courage to be. 6. The fear of desire versus the fear of truth. Many people believe that married men feel threatened by confident women because they fear the desire that may arise. There's a bit of truth to that, but it's not the full story. The desire is manageable. It can be rationalized, repressed, channeled. What really scares you is not being attracted to you. It is the truth about himself that his presence reveals. Desire is an emotion. Emotions pass. They can be controlled with discipline, with detachment, with the psychological tools that he has developed over the years, but the truth does not pass. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. And the truth that his confidence exposes is this: he is living a half-life. He accepted crumbs when he could have demanded the entire feast. He silenced his true voice so many times that it almost disappeared. This truth does not emerge as articulated thought. It arrives as a diffuse feeling of malaise, as a restlessness that has no logical explanation, like the sudden realization that maybe he betrayed himself long before he even considered cheating on someone else. And that's infinitely more disturbing than any physical attraction could ever be. The fear of desire allows him to continue to see himself as a moral, faithful, controlled man. It's even a way to feel virtuous. Look how I resist temptation. But the fear of the truth collapses this whole structure. There is no virtue in running away from oneself. There is no honor in living on autopilot. There is no integrity in maintaining a marriage because it is easier than facing who you have become within it. That's why his confidence is more frightening, because it's not about seduction. It's not about threatening his marriage. It's about threatening the core illusion he's built about life itself. And between losing you or losing that illusion, he will always choose to keep the fantasy, even if it means spending the rest of your life running away from anything or anyone that forces you to wake up. 7. When admiration turns into a threat. At first, he may even admire your confidence. From afar, it is an attractive, interesting, praiseworthy quality. He may make comments about how self-assured you are, how unfazed, how comfortable you look in your own skin. But there is an invisible limit. And when your confidence exceeds that limit, when it becomes too clear, too strong, too constant, the admiration becomes something else. It becomes discomfort. It becomes a threat. This transformation happens the moment he realizes that his confidence is not performance. It's not something you turn on and off depending on the situation. It's not a mask that you wear in public and take off at home. It is genuine internal structure. And that changes everything, because it means you don't need it for anything. It doesn't need his validation. It doesn't need his approval. It doesn't need him to make you feel valuable, because you already know he is. This total emotional independence activates something primal in him, an old part of the psyche that associates self-worth with being needed. If you don't need it, what's its place? If you are complete on your own, what can it offer? And in the face of these unanswered questions, the admiration he felt turns into disguised resentment. It becomes subtle attempts to diminish you. It becomes comments that seem like compliments but carry poison. He can start pointing out flaws where there are none. You can question your choices in a way that seems like a concern but is control. He may try to create situations where you need to ask for help, where your trust needs to give way to vulnerability that he can rescue. Because if he manages to make you need him, even momentarily, the threat decreases. You become comprehensible again within his mental model. But if you stand firm, if your confidence does not waver, if you remain whole regardless of his approval or disapproval, then there is no way out. He can't diminish you. He can't control you. And it definitely can't use you to sustain the fragile ego it has built. So the only option left is to avoid you completely, because to be close to you is to be close to the truth. And the truth, for those who live on illusions, is the definitive threat. 8. The liberation he rejects out of fear. There is a cruel irony in this whole dynamic. His confidence, which scares him so much, could be just the catalyst he needs to wake up, to get out of the automatic life he built, to start asking honest questions about who you are and what you really want. Your presence could be the call to his own journey of self-knowledge, but instead of embracing this possibility, he runs away from it with all his might. Why? Because liberation requires death, not physical death, but symbolic death of everything he believes himself to be. It requires letting the identity built on social roles die. It requires burying the version of himself that everyone expects him to be. It requires traversing the uncharted territory of discovering who he is when all the masks fall. And this process is terrifying for someone who has spent decades building security on top of external structures. Liberation also requires full responsibility. While he may blame marriage, work, financial obligations, children for not living fully, there is someone other than himself to carry the burden. But if he really wakes up, if he starts making conscious choices, then there are no more excuses. Each day lived halfway becomes a deliberate choice, and facing this requires courage that most people do not develop. So he chooses family prison over frightening freedom. He chooses the small, predictable life over the giant, uncertain possibility. You choose to stay asleep because waking up hurts too much. And you, with all your confidence and authenticity, become a constant reminder of the path he will not take, of the potential that he will let die without realizing, of the whole life that he will sacrifice on the altar of security and comfort. That doesn't mean you need to dim your light. It doesn't mean that your confidence is a problem. It just means that you understood something fundamental. His reaction was never about you. It was always about the unbearable reflection you create. And as long as he doesn't have the courage to look at this reflection and do something about it, his presence will always be a threat. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're doing everything right. And this, for those who live on compromises and half-truths, is the most dangerous provocation that exists.